honor for me to present our first speaker, and Elizabeth, please start the recording. This beautiful Mr. is Peter Block. And a month ago, no, 2 months ago, when we started with the first preparations of this webinar, already during the first conversation, Peter and I had a really great co-creative session about what he wanted to do. We were actually already doing the webinar during the preparation. That's what about it. He's from Cincinnati. He's an author of many books. He's a very, very warm, charismatic person and a very, very profound coach and leader. Dear Peter, it is with a lot of pleasure that I give you the floor. Success.
Thank you, Carl. So thank you for showing up. My intention is to give you a way of thinking. Coaching organizations, trying to have an impact in the world is really about helping people shift their thinking, change their mind. And so our learning is about the same for us. So if you go to the next slide, Elizabeth. So team coaching. So organizational life, every team, everybody thinks they're unique. And their first stance is, you don't understand what I'm up against. And I've tried everything and nothing's worked. And my job is to convince you that I'm right and I tried everything. And so in some ways, the purpose of coaching, the purpose of individuals is to help them, confront them with their freedom. The fact that we all have more choices than we could imagine. And if I'm stuck, if I showed up for a team building or a team coaching session, it means that what I'm doing now isn't working. Now some people say, I just want to learn and grow. And so in some sense, our job is to help people get unstuck. And so one way to phrase that is to say our job is to help people see that they have choices, to create choices people don't know they have. And the second unique thing about team coaching is you're dealing with a group. You're dealing with their relationships with each other, which is why it's so much more powerful in a way and harder than individual coaching. And so in some ways, helping people contract with each other about whatever they have in common. So if you say, what's the point? Well, the point is always to help people, confront people with the choices that they have and do it in a kind way, and then to get people connected with each other. And so what I want to do in this time is to kind of give you some of the methodology that leads to accountability, that leads to people feeling that they have a choice. So accountability just means that I have shown up as a co-creator of the world that I'm in. Most of us in organizations and systems think we're in effect. We think we're an effective parenting. If you ask people, how do you explain a human being and what they do and what they are, they'll come up with lots of explanations. It's parenting, it's environment, it's nurture, it's nature, it's sibling order. The one thing they never list is the idea of free will. So in my mind, coaching, working with teams is to evoke or to create space for the notion that they are creating the world, even the one they're complaining about. So if you go to the next slide, this is always done through questions. And so questions are what you're good at. To be a coach is to get comfortable with deeper and deeper questions that you use to kind of create a world. So we know in the beginning was the world, was the word, and we know that a shift in language is in the nature of transformation. So if you told me that I'm in the business of transformation, I want systems to transform, I want to be a participant in individuals transforming, I would say, well, then you're in the business of creating a conversation people have not had before. And transformation is a linguistic phenomenon. And so questions are a methodology for evoking a different conversation. Answers keep us apart. Questions bring us together. And so in a sense, team coaching is to get a group of people willing to ask each other questions that they're not used to asking. And so what I've listed on this slide are 4 questions. You don't need any more questions than these 4. I've made a living off of these 4 questions for longer than I want to admit. And so let me just tell you kind of the world that's within these questions. So the first question is, what do you want from each other? So most of the time people talk about opinions. They engage in speech acts that are not very powerful. Most gatherings come together and they want to know, what's our history? How did we get started? Most people come together and they want to know, what's the problem that brought us together? And so we all take our identity from problem solving. Mostly the problem is caused by someone not in the room. So the antidote to overanalyzing the world, the antidote to being lost in your feelings about things, the antidote to kind of making a list or break is to say, what do you want from each other? As soon as I look at another human being and say, what do you want from me? Here's what I want from you. Connection is established. There's nothing connects us more than the question, what do we want from each other? And that's the essence of contracting. It's the essence of life. So if you say, what do I do with a group? What do I do with a team? Well, you have in mind the fact that where you're headed, however you need to start, or whatever your own pattern or style is, having each of these 4, 6, 8, 30 people at some point look at each other in the eye and say, here's what I want from you. What do you want from me? I don't care. It's not even about reaching agreement about one. It's that you're teaching people that if they declare to each other what they want from each other, the action always moves forward. Now, it's different from saying, what outcomes do you want from this project? What common goals do we have? That's fine, but that's not powerful. What's powerful is, what do you and I want from each other? Second question is to create ownership in the world. So you say, how do you coach with teams? You get curious with one question, and you ask them, what are we doing as a team to contribute to the very thing we're complaining about? Now, most people will come in with a problem. I never believe the problem. The problem is always the presenting problem. And this comes right out of traditional coaching. So people say, well, the cost is too high, something's too slow, something's broken. Whatever they think the problem is, and I got this from James Hollis, whatever you think the problem is, that's not it. Now, I don't want to be disrespectful because people describe the world as best as they can describe it. But I know in my bones, if I'm going to have an impact, if I'm going to make a difference, that I have to find out what is their role in contributing the thing that they're suffering with, the thing that they're creating, the thing they're complaining about. And so you want to bring into the team conversation their willingness to say, well, what's our role in this? And it's a big deal. You know, evil does exist in the world. Other groups, marketing, engineering, sales, IT, are creating hell for us, whoever us is. So when people say, well, these people aren't making that, or my boss, or my boss's boss, whoever they want to aim at, if they say they're part of the problem, they are part of the problem. But that's not going to take us anywhere, because most of us are waiting for someone else's transformation. My waiting for them to change, praying for them to change, never changed anything. So this question, what are you doing? What is our role? Even if our role is to be passive or quiet or kind or smile, most of our sins are sins of omission in the system world and the organizational world. And so the essence of creating accountability is to ask people, what are you doing to contribute to the problem? Now, they may say nothing. They may be committed to their victimhood, or they may be a team that doesn't trust each other enough to answer this question. Ask it anyway. If they say, I don't know what I'm contributing, we're doing as part of the problem, not to the solution, but the problem, then you say, well, if you did know what it would be, what would it be? And I'll ask everything 3 times. So the other piece that unlocks teams is most places people want to get along. They want to be team players. Team coaching is helping people be team players. They want to be liked, and they're afraid half the time. I mean, I started this work in the late 60s, so that's a while ago. Half of you weren't even born then. And people are more afraid of their bosses in the world now than they were 50 years ago, 40 years ago. And what keeps me stuck is my belief that I can't say no. And so a powerful question is, what do you want to say no to? And there's variations of this. What's the no you're unwilling to say? And so you have to, and if people can't say no, if a team can't say no to each other, their commitments don't mean anything. What they do is they'll live in a world of lip service, live in a world of obligation. So this question, like the others, just opens up a whole world. Now, just because people say no, it doesn't mean they get their way. But if they can't say no, their yeses mean nothing. And then the fourth thing is about gifts. People now most of us live in cultures where we're focused on deficiencies, needs, what's wrong, problem solving. We're blind to our gifts. So the way to complete every team coaching session is to give people time to answer the question, what did you do with each other today that you appreciate? And have team members tell each other, here's something you did in this conversation. It doesn't matter if it's virtual, in the room, whatever. What did you do in this that was useful to me? Because most of us don't know what our gifts are. Most teams don't know what their gifts are. They only know what problems they came to solve. And so this, again, opened up a whole world that says you've been working on your deficiencies forever. I have never seen a situation where people working on their deficiencies made those deficiencies go away. What makes deficiencies, they don't go away, but they lose their power. Of course we have these problems. Of course there's team dynamics. Of course some people talk too much. Of course the boss is this or that. Every team has a scapegoat. You can't have a team without somebody say, boy, if that person was different, we'd be better off as a group. Every family has an identified patient. And so all this deficiency conversation, it's always interesting, it's compelling. We like it, but it has no power. And so the intention in your mind is to say, how do I have their deficiencies lose their power? And one way to have them lose their power is to say, what is working for us? What did we do in the last 10 minutes, the last 30 minutes that was useful, that was productive? And you get people saying what that, and something shifts in our relationship to what's not working. It's not Pollyanna. It's not looking for good news. I'm not an optimist. I don't organize my world according to hope. All right? I'd rather choose faith than hope. But the conversation of gifts, very powerful, very useful. So these are 4 methodologies. These are questions that produce anxiety, ambiguity, and are deeply personal in the people that you're talking to. And that's what coaching is about, is to find a high trust way to produce anxiety, get people to be personal, and live with the ambiguity of life. So what do you want from each other? I don't know what I want from you. Well, if you did know what you wanted, what would it be? And it's not negotiation. You tell people, listen to each other's wants. And then if you listen to the wants around the circle, then you say what you want. What does anybody want to say yes to? So it's not a negotiation. It's my telling you what I want and then asking you the question, is there anything you want to say yes to? What do you contribute to the problem? It is about guilt. Guilt is a nice word for responsibility. What do you want to say no to? What's working for us? So that takes care of that slide. And that's most of what I have to say. The rest is footnotes. So let's go to the next slide. So some other kind of thinking framework. And please ask questions. Carl is inviting you to ask questions because hopefully this will be a conversation. I could ask you.
Yes, Peter. There's already one. There's already, well, there are a few, but I'm selecting a very interesting one here. How can team members reveal what they want to say no to when the boss is in the room? So how can they, in a context that is safe and secure, how can they reveal what they want to say no to Like
Beautiful
what is in the
question.
room?
So
I
what
thought
you're
so.
saying is you need trust in the room to answer this very risky question. Now, it's risky, so you don't start off with it. You don't say, hi, welcome to the team coaching session. Now let's list what we want to say no to. But I have the belief that people are capable of partnering with their boss as an alternative to submission, to being afraid of their boss. And the reason you say no isn't because you don't like this thing, it's because you don't think it will work. So normally, say you've got an hour with a group, you might ask this question in the 40th minute and do more connecting questions, more trust-building questions. And ask them
Another
like a
question.
Yeah, so
another question that goes in line with the previous one is how to make him or her feel enough secure and included to reveal that one. It's an often asked question in terms of trustful leadership, but what's your vision on that, Peter?
Well, you've got the right question. So how do we build trust in each other, in ourselves? And that's why they need us. They don't need us to know what to do. They need us to begin to connect to each other. And so on the outcome slide, it says contact before content. What does that mean? Well, I always ask people, here's some trust-building questions. One trust-building question is, why was it important for you to be in this conversation? What would it take for you to be present today? What is it that you have in mind? These are all questions that are lower risk questions. And so you open with low risk personal questions. What do you have in mind for this gathering? Why was it important for you to be here? What would it take for you to be present? Another half a step up in the risk questions is, what's the crossroads you think we're at? What do you think we're up against as a group? Now, these are easier to ask, but in my mind, I know where I'm headed. I'm headed to asking them what they want from each other. And then I'm headed near the end, when the trust is built, to say, is there something you said yes to that you no longer think is possible? Now, you'll have your own language that you will fit this concept into the reality of what you're doing. Sometimes you walk in and there's enough trust to ask it earlier. It may take you 3 sessions. But I'm offering these as something you hold in mind that I'm headed towards, even if I can't get there in this first hour or second hour. So you're right about that. But the no is not out of a style question. The no is, what is it you want to say no to because you don't think it's going to work? And as a coach, same for us. If we're the target of magical expectations, I have to say, I can't do that. Because most people want us to fix their situation without them having to play much of a role. Or they want 3 sessions of coaching and that's it. And so, great question, how do I build trust between yourself and your clients? And then how do you help take what you know about building trust between you and your clients and use that concept to help them trust each other in the same way? Anyway, thank you for the questions. If there are more questions, I would much rather have questions than slides.
And another one says that what do you do before the team coaching to foster trust in the team so people can ask the key questions? So I think there's a part of the question focused on the external or internal team coach, and another part probably to the line manager of the team. What can you do to prepare upfront that trustful environment?
So there's no simple answer, but basically you substitute curiosity for advice. So the distrust is built by our efforts to be helpful. Distrust is built by managers thinking they know what's best for their team. So if I have an answer, if I think I'm here to develop other people, to help them grow. Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you again, but you were gone for a few seconds.
Okay, well you didn't miss anything.
No, I don't think so.
So being helpful, knowing what's best for others, giving advice are destroy trust. What builds trust is curiosity. my being interested in your view of the world without having any commentary on it. And so if you want to build trust with your clients, if you're interviewing team members beforehand, ask them how they see the world. And when they tell you, your response is simply, why does that matter to you? So the most powerful trust-building question I know of, the most loving question I know of, is the question when somebody tells me their view of the world, even though I know they're wrong or think they're crazy or whatever it triggers in me, whatever I project onto them as their issue, whatever help I think I should be giving them, I ignore that. And I say, tell me why that matters to you. And when they answer, I ask them again, tell me why that matters to you. So my trying to go deeper and finding out what means something to you is the best trust building thing I have. I don't build trust by being helpful. And you want to add another question, Carl?
There are lots of coming in at the moment.
Why don't you process the questions and I'll keep talking.
That's a good one. How do we ensure team members do not run their own agendas in the session?
I know. Exactly. Exactly. I want to know what their agenda is, but I'm going to start by trusting in the goodwill of team members. Like one key is if one member talks to you about another member, I never take it as true, ever. And so in the course of getting to know the team, maybe you're interviewing the team, they say, well, here's what so-and-so does, here's how they feel, here's where they stand, here's their agenda. I say, thank you, very interesting. And then I don't take it seriously. I don't believe everybody projects onto each other. And so if people are disruptive in their agenda, here's what I do. I say, could we stop for a second? And then I ask the team, are we getting what we came from? I don't want to take on a difficult member of the team directly by asking them to get back to the agenda or by saying they're talking, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give them that power. I would just say, George, could you stop, let me interrupt you for a second, and then ask the group, and this is giving the group a self-monitoring device they can use. Let's stop for a second and go around and say, are we getting what we came for? And that helps people get back. And it takes the power out of an over-talkative or agenda-laden person. It's not that people don't try to hijack an agenda. It's just that after they've said something once, it's enough. And so my thought that comes at the moment is not to take them on directly. And I don't argue with people. If people say something stupid, I say, good point. I want to take power away. I want to diffuse the disruptive members of the group. I don't want to take them on. And I tell people, if you argue with me or with this process, I'm warning you now, I'm going to take your side. And that way I don't get seduced, because sometimes people say things that trigger my own issues. So in this slide, number 3, it says deal with resistance and difficult people. Well, resistance occurs because people are projecting something onto this meeting, onto me, onto each other. And so you say, well, when the resistance is there, I have to deal with it, but not by arguing with it. So if it's a person with their own agenda, if they're disruptive, if they're talking too much, if they're changing the subject, if they're bored, if they're using their cell phone, they're somewhere else, I just stop and I try to get at the underlying concern by naming what's happening. So if somebody's pushing their own agenda, I will say to them, this thing is really important to you, isn't it? And they say, yeah. And I'll say, why does that matter to you? Don't get caught up in the content. I just say, why does that matter to you? Resistance is an invitation for us to go deeper. And we do that by naming what's happening. If somebody keeps veering away, I'll say, we keep veering away. I won't say, don't veer away. I just try to name what you see happening, which is number 4, what's really going on. Go ahead, Carl.
I will make a summary of about 2-3 questions now, and then I suggest we continue a bit in the slides. Where is the balance, Peter, between the process of co-creation within the team, the boss together with the team and an internal or external coach, or the boss as a coach, the process of co-creation on the one hand, and well, the fact that there is no doubt a kind of strategy or team objectives to achieved, so there's not total freedom for the team. Where is that balance?
So but that question is, you're right on it. So you say this is the paradoxical nature of life. You know, everybody wants a way. Well, fundamentalism, ideology. So that's frightening. And so you say both things are true. The boss has an obligation to define the game. Here are the rules. Here's the promises we made as a team. And here are the ground rules that we've either been handed to us, sometimes laminated as a vision, mission statement. But there's always room for interpreting what is required. So whatever the system requires, whatever the boss's boss requires, whatever the world hands to you, they have a right to hand it out. They have a right to say, here's the plan, here's the outcomes we have to have. Here are the values or vision we want to live by. But there's always space for interpretation, embodiment, making them specific. So while I can't say, I don't buy the goal, I don't buy the outcome, I don't buy the delivery date, I don't buy the schedule. Well, sometimes that's life, because the system needs to manage itself in an orderly way. There needs to be some predictability inside a system, and if you can't live with that, then find a place where you can. But if we're here, but what bosses don't realize is that the inmates run the prison. And you can have all the vision you want, all the ground rules, all the things that you think are sacred. Yes, they are sacred. But people in the team are the ones who are going to bring those to life. And bringing something to life, deciding what pace, what to take first, what texture, what context, what language, what people are involved. There's always all kinds of space. For people to have choice. And so the notion that, well, I don't have enough freedom, that is a construct. That's a story that you can rearrange, redo that story and say, I want to know what's required of me and us, and then where are the choices within that I have? And you can, as a coach, you ask them this question. You say, well, where does choice reside? And if people say we have no choice, that means they have some unfinished business. That's to say I have no choice is a form of complaint. It's a form of saying that, well, something's wrong. That, you know, so anytime people have a story about why they have no capacity to co-create the embodiment of what the institution requires, I treat that's the work, is to help them reconstruct that story and these questions of what do you want to say no to? What do you want from each other? What's our role in creating this? What are the gifts you came here to bring? Those 4 questions are the best way I know to rearrange the story, which is, I'm helpless. I'm a victim. You don't know what it's like around here. So that's probably over answering a question that wasn't asked, but that's what I do.
Okay. I think you can proceed a little bit with the slides now, Peter. I will interrupt again when enough new questions come in.
Carl. I like you. Your questions are the point. I'm the interruption. But let me, next slide, Elizabeth. If you're still there, yeah. So here's, and again, I'm kind of offering methodology as we go along, but I want to just focus on the thinking. So our goal is to be as authentic. To be authentic is just to put into words what you see happening, and to help people be more authentic with each other. And if they don't trust each other, it just means we have more work to do. Every gathering, I would never go to a gathering, a meeting, a coaching session without asking people what they want from each other. I do not ask them what they want so much or what their expectations are from me or the session. And the reason for that is they're always too low. Like when I run a workshop, I do not ask them, what do you expect out of this workshop? Because it's too small. Well, I want a tool, I want a tip, I want a technique. I want us to get along a little better. I want us to, but that's different. Expectations are what I fantasy, magical thoughts. Wants are real. So I always say, what do we want from each other? I know when people are doing things that are dysfunctional, I don't argue with them. I just name what they're doing. You keep changing the subject. You're talking a long time. You seem concerned. What's really bothering you? This naming is a core skill I want them to have with each other. So when people are doing things that aren't working, I just ask them a question. What are you up to? What really matters to you? You've said this several times. One of my favorite questions is, what doesn't the rest of this team understand about what you're saying? So people read themselves, which is why meetings take so long. They want to talk about history and they want to make their point 7 times. I say, stop a second. What is it you think people don't get? And that takes the steam out of their repetition. And then when somebody does something right, I'll say, that was very courageous of you, even on the spot. I say, wow, what a clear statement, or what a thank you for that. And I tell them specifically, here's what you're doing. If it's a boss that's letting go a little bit or joining in as a peer, I say, wow, you're the boss here, yet you show up as a peer. That's amazing. That's very useful. And then when you say something nice, gift statement to each other, you encourage people just to say thank you, and don't do a big thing about it. So these are kind of, if you want to hold the framework in mind as to what the business of the coaching session is, these are 4 things I want to keep in mind. So let's go to the next slide, unless, Carl, you have some better questions or good questions or any question. Even the questions are off the wall. Those are my favorite.
I'll come back to you soon, I promise.
Okay, so the next slide, this is really a kind of contracting. So coaching teams is to basically help people contract with each other, which is asking them what they want from each other. The other thing you can ask them is, what's the promises you're willing to make to each other, which is different than negotiating agreements. So I always say, okay, we've got half the time left or whatever. Given what we've done, given talking about what the issue is, given talking about what we want from each other, given talking about what's working well, what we want to say no to. If you're in a low trust situation, you can't ask people what they want to say no to. You can't ask them, what doubts do you have about what we're doing here? And most people feel comfortable expressing their doubts. So after all that's done, then you're saying, well, what's the promise? So contracting is born of wants. And the second thing is to say, what's the promise you're willing to make to each other? And you collect those promises. And that's an alternative to bargaining. So if you'll do this, I'll do that. There's no power in negotiated agreements. Of course, you need them. But if you say, my agreement is contingent on what you agree to, then that's barter, and it falls apart. Because I always complain, well, you didn't do your part. Where if you say, what's the promise you're willing to make with no expectation of return? Ouch.
Peter.
Yes, Peter. Thank you.
Some 5 to 6 are coming in. I will summary the first 3 things like respect and honesty and authenticity and trust and so on and so on. A million of books are written about that. What keeps it being so difficult to really get into practice these wonderful values? And secondly, an application of that, one question is, what do you do when one is talking about someone very powerful during a team meeting, but that person is not in the meeting at that very moment. So you're talking about someone very powerful who's really impacting and influencing the work, but that person is not at that moment in the room. What's your vision on authenticity, respect, trust, etc., and that situation?
Well, the distrust comes from the patriarchal nature of our system. So patriarchy is the belief that systems, businesses, organizations run best when they're under control. It's a belief in consistency, control, and predictability. And as soon as you create a pyramidal structure, a patriarchal structure, it's a breeding ground for caution and distrust, because I come to believe that if I work for you, you own me. And it takes a certain amount of, there's an epidemic of collusion. The boss says, I own you, and the subordinate says, that's what I signed up for. The boss says, I know what's best for you. And the subordinates, the workers say, thank you, tell me what you want, tell me where we're headed. So our dependency, on the one hand, meets people's wish for control, and when I'm dependent, I believe in patriarchy. Most people who complain about their bosses believe in patriarchy. They just want to be the boss. They want to be the patriarch. Our work in the coaching world, in the team building world, is to create partnership. And so you're trying to give people alternative ways of being together. And in my world, I call it building community, building connection. We've run, I wrote a book on flawless consulting years ago, and we still run 300 or more workshops a year. And it's trying to give people the skills and the landscape of partnership, of connectedness, of community. But the fear is so dominant, and half the books on building trust is to how to be a better parent, how to be a better boss. Leadership training should be about how to convene people. What you know as a coach is a good model for what a convening-oriented leader. That's the option. Where most leadership training is how to teach people how to control people so that people feel better about being controlled. That's why this thing is alive, and that's why we're more afraid than we were 50 years ago. The second question is how that when people are talking a lot about a powerful person not in the room. So what do you do with that? Well, the reason you want to do something with it is because that is so helpless, so useless. Basically, it's an escape from accountability for me to complain about someone not in the room. So I would ask the person, why is that person so important to you? So what I want to do is go beneath their storyline about the evil person out in the room and ask, why does this matter so much to you? What do you want from them? And then I know where I'm headed. Well, what's your contribution to the thing that you're so concerned about? So you're always trying to go deeper with the question. Now, they may not answer the question. I'll only ask it twice, 3 times if I'm lucky. But I know in the asking of the question, you're relocating where the locus of control and accountability exists in the world. And you're always trying to bring it back into this room. And so my best shot is to say, why is that person so important?
Peter, do you prefer one more question, or do you prefer to continue?
I've read my slides, so I'd much rather have the question.
Okay. There's a lot of remarks and questions about the trust phenomenon. How do you know it? How do you measure it? How do you know that there is really trust? How do you deal with low trust scores in surveys, etc., etc.? There's also another interesting term coming in, that is a term on negotiation. Now, let me try to rephrase a few questions. If you feel, if you see, if you observe that the trust is not what it should be, and if you do not know exactly where the problem is, how can negotiation, or how could negotiation be of any help? I mean, the trust is not 100%, but you still need to proceed with your team. So is it possible to negotiate with each other about things that needs to be done and who's going to do what, even if the trust is not exactly 100% what it should be?
Well, first of all, the trust is never 100%. We're human beings. And so we all have a shadow side. We all are vulnerable in our own way. So it's not a question of trust 100%. I would never ask the question, how much do you trust each other? Because I don't know where it takes us. So I would rather engage people in trust-building questions and conversations than to talk about the distrust, because everybody thinks the trust or distrust is justified. And all you're doing is inviting their story. And remember, whatever people explain to you, it's just a story. I love the Russian. No negative about Russia, but the notion that in Russia, even the past is unpredictable. And I think that's true about all of us, that my explanation of the life or the distrust is just a story I'm making up. And what we're trying to do is give them an alternative story. Now, negotiation is basically people asking people what do they want from each other and what are they willing to agree to. And that can take place anywhere. Now, what you're trying to do with the coaching is to change the context within which negotiation takes place. If people don't trust each other and you can't get them into a conversation that will build the trust, and what I try to do in this conversation today is to say, well, here are the questions that are likely to build the trust. You know, what doubts do you have? What do you want from each other? What's our role in doing this? You know, but our job is to create a context where negotiations can be improved. But if you know the world is what it is, and if people don't trust each other, then you say, well, what are you willing to agree to? What promises are you willing to make? What agreements can we at this moment? Now, the world wants to focus on what we can't agree on. That's the deficiency orientation. So our work is to say, I understand all the things that keep you apart. All the things that keep you apart, I get that. I would like to know what can you agree on. And I would rather have two agreements on small things come out of a gathering than saying, well, okay, since we can't agree, the boss is going to have to decide. Now, you know, patriarchy, boss, control, I never argue against bosses. But to me, negotiation, our work is to change the context within which negotiations take place and then focus on what people can agree with. And you can tell them, look, this is a low trust situation, so why don't we focus on what we agree on and let that be the step we take at this particular meeting. And, you know, sometimes the magic works and sometimes it doesn't. So I want to skip, Elizabeth, skip a few slides and find the one with the triangle on it in the end. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Stop! So now we've got 15 minutes, right, Carl?
Yep, about
so
13 minutes.
I would like to ask the people listening, how is this going? Are you getting what you came for? Is there something you want from me or this conversation that you haven't gotten yet? So let me just put that out there. And to me, I will do that wherever I am. Because usually we wait till it's over and then we say, how did it go? Well, it's too late. You know, it's like assessing your life at the end of it. A eulogy is too late to hear what my gifts are because I'm going to be gone. So let me throw that out and say, if people are finding something useful about this, I'd like to know what it is because maybe that's the more important thing to talk about. But while we're waiting for that.
So far, Peter, the question box here that I'm looking in is absolutely exploding at the moment with extremely positive feedback. I'm sorry that there are no questions in it.
Okay, in that case, I like to quit while I'm ahead, so goodbye, Carl. Just kidding. That's good. Well, it's good to know. Thank you, because it's, you know, it helps me stay with what I had. Thank you. It feels good to hear that. So here's another All of these things are so simple. I once asked a friend of mine, Tim Go, I said, Tim, I'm making a living by asking people, what do you want? How are you feeling? What's your contribution? I said, I feel guilty. He said, what else is there to talk about? And so these are there's not really much else. The rest is just kind of talk. So here's another one. So you get people that are not doing well together. What do you do with that? And you're asked, I've been brought in, and you all have 1,000 times with everybody's got a story about the other side. If they would change, I'd be better. It's marketing versus engineering versus IT versus HR versus blah, 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 blah. So patriarchy is designed to isolate us in our wish to maintain control and consistency and predictability. We need people feeling isolated and dependent. The performance appraisal has one purpose, which is to let people know once a year, I own them. And so all of these questions, all this landscape I'm giving you is the alternative, to bring the alternative to the story of patriarchy into the world without having to argue about it. So this question, I love this question. Wherever there's conflict, the core question is, do you want to be right or do you want to work something out? If people want to be right, then I have to name and bring into the dialogue the fact they would rather be right than to work something out. And in my edgy, aggressive way, what I'm thinking, I don't say it, is if you want to be right, then hire a lawyer. You don't need a coach. Our coaching methodology in the face of fundamentalism is useless. And if somebody comes in with having to have their way, believing maybe from God or from each other or their long experience or something they read on the subway, that they have the answer. I have the answer and you don't. That is the most frightening thing in the world. And we don't have the methodology to work that out other than the question. Look them in the eye and say, I can't tell whether you want to be right or work something out. And if they go on and give you their pitch, their ideology, their fundamentalism, but whatever it is, and this is about work or God, it doesn't matter, then I say it sounds like you would rather be right than to work something out. Silence, eye contact, that's the most powerful thing I know to do. And most of the time, people will say, well, I guess I do want to work something out. And when they say that, you say thank you. And then you remain silent, you say thank you. And then you ask the other person. Sometimes if it's really intense conflict, I'll ask this separately. When we're getting ready for a session and somebody has a strong point of view and you feel it, I say, do you want to be right or work something out in this session coming up? They say, no, I want to be right. Then I look them in the eye, boss, subordinate, janitor, I don't care who it is. And I say, well, if you want to be right, nothing is going good or is going to come out of the session that we're planning. I just want you to know that. I want you to come. Yeah.
One set of questions to end with, is that okay for you?
Yes.
A question that is often returning, not only this session but also other webinars, that is, what precisely, in what nature is team coaching or organization coaching or group coaching different from face-to-face coaching? It's also a personal struggle that I have. Well, it's the basic set of competencies, but still it is my feeling that there is another dimension, perhaps
Yes.
a more complicated dimension, I don't know, but it's not the first time that this question is asked. What's your vision?
Well, we have very sophisticated technologies, methods, landscapes, whether for working with helping individual development. Spiritually, it's all individually focused. It's your relationship with God. You sit, you meditate, you go to church. Therapy-wise, we know lots. We have very undeveloped frameworks, landscape, tradition, rituals for team, for community, for collective, for group. So that's why it's interesting, and that's why it drives you crazy. because I know that there is a dimension to us in a circle. It does not exist when it's the two of us together, whether it's on the phone or not. And so what I've given my life to really is to try to give voice to thinking that teams and groups have a dimension, a dynamic, a reality, a beauty in and of themselves that's very different than individual. And it means that we have to learn about what it means to convene, what it means to ask questions of a group and let them answer, what it means to help people get connected to each other in the moment, what it means when one person has a breakthrough, the whole team has a breakthrough. You don't have to get everybody on board. There's a communal reality possibility. And that's, I think, with the community of practice, Carl, that you're helping to convene. Our work is to invent what those things are we do in groups, and that see that groups have a power and a leverage and a depth that the individual work will never, ever have. In a group, they never have to ask the question, how are we going to bring this back to work? They brought it back to work. They never have to ask the question, okay, how do I transfer my learning here to the real world? No, the group is an embodiment, is a microcosm. It's the oyster on the beach. This is the real world, and if people can experience something with each other that is akin to the new story, an alternative story, a story of partnership or community, whatever you want to call it, then they don't have to, they know they can do it. And so it has a demonstrating power, a demonstrating possibility that the individual work will never have. And I don't even do the individual work anymore. At some point in my career, I felt one-to-one wasn't right for me. Now, maybe it's just me, all right, but I felt I'm going to spend my time focusing on how do you, and the groups to me that I've played with have been 500 people, 120 people. There are methods, if you get serious about the team and the group power, then you start saying, well, and there's large group methodology that I'm sure is part of your wisdom and understanding. So I love that question, even though I probably didn't answer the question that was asked, but that, like I said before, that's my pattern. So we've got a couple of minutes, Carl.
Two more practical questions, because there's a mass of questions coming in now, so I try to summarize. A lot of questions are focused now on the practical organization of your work. What is an ideal setting? How many people, etc., etc. And also some questions on what do you agree concretely on, Peter, when contracting with the client?
Right.
If you could briefly give some input on that.
So the second one, you know, I need to be clear what are the essential wants I have for this thing to work. It's not that I don't have any preferences. I do windows. I take any job. It doesn't have to be big time, important, strategic, or large. I just want it to work because all I have is my credibility. And so my essential questions is this important to you? Are you willing to look at your own contribution to what's going on here? Are we willing to give this enough time to give us a chance to be successful? Are you willing to have I want you to have conversations that you're not used to having. I want to talk with you about who needs to be in the room. So each of you got to think, what are the things you want? And that becomes the base of contracting. And the only reason I ask for those things is I'm terrified of failure. I don't want to. I have many failures, and I've always been for lousy contracting, or because I wanted the job so bad, I skipped it. Now, back to the first question, because we're close, is on size. You know, this 3 is the smallest size I believe in. And so I'm always breaking people into groups of 3. But I'll take anything up to 100, 125 people in the room for 3 hours. You can get them connected in a way they weren't before they came. And I talk a little bit, break them into groups of 3. 3 is unstable. 12 is a lot of people. Some people do groups of 10, 12, that's fine. Teams are that size. But you don't have to feel limited by the group size, because you know you're going to break them into unfacilitated small groups in which you create a context that you're speaking to the story. You let them know that something here is going to happen that's unique by the way you open your first 10 minutes, if you wouldn't do that. And then you're going to break
Peter.
them into groups and give them questions to ask each other that'll change the world. Yes, sir.
Peter, I see it's close to the hour. For some people who have participated by bridge line or who have lived some technical problems during the webinar, please send both passwords to Elizabeth Jackson. The first